Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Propreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dino Watt. Excited to have you again listening in wherever you are, whether it be your car or work or running on the treadmill. We really appreciate the time that you spend with us here on the Propreneur Podcast, trying to bring you the best practices for you to run your business. And today we have another professional. We always love to look at our professionals versus our experts. And we have professionals on today. Dr. Aaron Williams is calling in, and excited to have him. I've actually got to meet him in person, which doesn't always happen when it comes to our podcast, but we actually just got to spend some time together last weekend. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dino.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this, especially from what we were able to talk about when we were together a couple weekends ago in Salt Lake City on your topic. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you. Let's give everybody an introduction to who you are, where you're from, all the fun, gooey stuff.
So I'm the orthodontist owner at High Five Orthodontics, and we're in Spokane, Washington. And that's on the east side, for those who aren't familiar with Washington all that well. Very opposite side of Seattle, very different demographic, very different climate and landscape, but we love it here. I'm originally from Southern Idaho, but of course all over the country for school. My wife was a nurse, and so she put me through a dental school in Iowa. Then we were in Colorado, Oklahoma, and back here to Washington. So
between you and your wife, your kids never get a sick day off school. They have no way to complain about anything.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. So what drew you to Spokane, if you're from Idaho? Because obviously, again, like you said, two totally different climates. Where you are is a lot much more deserty, right?
Right. And that's actually similar to where I grew up in Southern Idaho. Yeah, it's very deserty down there. There's but it's not too, there's actually more trees here than in Southern Idaho where I'm from. So anyways, we love the climate. We love the people. I personally like the fact that I can drive home when I want to, but otherwise there's a little bit of a buffer. They're not driving to me it's like Everybody Loved Raymond, you know that show?
Yeah.
If I lived that close to my parents, my mom would be across the road walking in on a random day. Just, hey, how's it going? I'm here.
So when you say everybody, you're not talking about the people, right? You're talking about family. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about family. Exactly. Yes. I love my family. I really
love
do.
It.
But it's kind of nice when I'm like, okay, I'm coming for this week.
That's
Boom.
right.
Yeah.
I love that. That's absolutely true. That's awesome. Okay. So one of the things I like to ask on the show is, what is your story, and why did you choose the profession you did? You know, we have people who get in a car accident and they were fixed from a chiropractor, so they love chiropractic, or someone got their teeth knocked out and so the dentist, repaired all that. Do you have a story that brought you into orthodontics?
Into orthodontics, yeah. Into orthodontics. When I was younger, I was sort of put on a pedestal by a lot of my classmates. As an example for somebody who's just friendly and kind all around. And I still remember this particular event, and it's made an indelible impression on me my whole life. There were a few of us who made it a particular goal to reach out to people in our school who weren't doing so well. Maybe it's emotionally or socially or whatever. And we thought of this particular person and said, hey, let's make an effort to give that person some attention. They just don't seem like they're doing so hot. And I was walking down the hall on my way out of school, and this person, we'll call her Susie, just for whatever reason.
Sure.
I don't think she had a lot of friends at the time. She felt kind of down on herself, and that's what made us think we should give this gal some attention. And I did nothing other than say, hey, have a great day, Susie. And that was it. And she stopped dead in her tracks and said, oh my God, you know my name? And she was just like flabbergasted that I took time out of my day to say hello. Well, anyways, a couple weeks later, me and this group of friends, we got this anonymous letter, and it said, it was anonymous in that there was no name on it, but given the the details, we knew who it was, and it said, the other day I felt so just bad about my life, and in fact I was ready to take my life. And so I wrote a note, a suicide note, if you will, and went to school, and I had every intention to fulfill that when I got home. But when I was at school, you, each of you, because it was sort of addressed to several of us individually, touched my life in some way, shape, or form. And in that particular case, I didn't do anything other than say, how's your day? And give it a little bit of attention. And when I started to look into professions, I originally started to look into it from a medical standpoint, like what do I like as far as the biology and the science of it all. But when I learned about orthodontics and started to shadow and see how that interaction is between us and our patients, I think it's very different than it is with dental and other specialties, especially in that we can give them a special dose of appreciation and a special support that I don't think they can get anywhere else. Now, I know that's not the only place you can give that. Of course, there's lots of other really great professions, but when I was already on this journey to become a doctor, if you will, orthodontics really spoke to me. It was a great opportunity for me to feel like I could create an atmosphere where the patients were uplifted and given a level of importance. So that's why.
Wow, that's powerful, and thank you for sharing that story. That's very powerful and moving, and I know a lot of people can relate to just needing someone to say hey to them. And I love that she said, "Wow, you know my name." I immediately thought about the importance of leaders to know not just the name of the team members, but really know the people that you work on and that are coming in, because you never know what's going on in their life ever.
Right.
And assumption is a terrible thing. And that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Were there other options that you had thought about besides orthodontics, or did you think about being a
Yeah, I
doctor
mean,
and like a medical doctor?
yeah, I was thinking, in a premature fashion. I always loved sports and medicine, so I was
Hmm.
thinking I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. I had aspirations to say I'll be like the team doctor for the Seattle Seahawks or the Vikings or whatever. That was really cool to me back in the day. And then when I started to learn more about myself, it became more about less of what was cool and more about what really fit me and my personality. So
Hmm.
while hindsight is 2020, I do feel blessed that I was guided to a profession that I enjoy, and I really love going to work every day rather than feeling like I'm trapped.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's so important to have that feeling and just the pure joy. Obviously, at the time of this recording, with Kobe Bryant just passing yesterday, I was watching a few things this morning, and it was an interview that he was giving, and he just took to the audience and he was like, "Look," and he says, "Dude, if you don't love what you're doing every day, go do something else. Like, it's
right,
just not worth it. Life's too short." You know, uh, you know, uh, Prolific words for him for sure.
right,
Well, one of the things that I love about hearing people's stories is obviously, even though we're all so different, we have a lot of similarities around what is that human connection. And even talking about, as a young man thinking about other people, like how can I brighten somebody else's life and how can I make them feel a little better? That's so apropos in today's society as well, with the bullying issues going on. And I wonder, how often do you get to, or have you told that story? Is that story on your website? Do you tell anybody about the story?
I not yet. It's storytelling is an art, and I use that as sort of an inspiration and to demonstrate my personal why.
Mm,
Because within my
so
practice and
important.
my staff, I think it's important that each of them has a why statement and a reason for doing what they do.
Yeah.
So I do use it for my staff so that they understand my vision and my reason. It will be on my website in an effort to demonstrate that storytelling. But right now, it's just not out there. No, not on my website. No.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for anybody even who's listening. Like, how do you connect with people? How do you let people? I always love going out. I've probably said this before on the show. I've definitely said it on stage before about how going up to websites and it's like about us, and then it's like all your credentials and a picture of you and your family in a field. And it's like, well, that's not really about us.
That's not right.
Right. It's like, but about us is that story. I have a previous client before who he actually told the story of how he and his wife fell in love in dental school. It's a cute little story, and they put it up on the front page of their website. It's so darling to see, and of course it connects to people, right? And like you said, storytelling's an art, and to be able to connect with people on that. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. The difference to me is like going to, say, a cocktail party, and every conversation is the same if it's always superficial.
Yep.
Whereas if you go on like a double date and you guys spend hours and you just sort of ask those deeper questions, I think that's what most people want to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Or we spend a couple minutes on a podcast and get to go deeper questions too.
That's true.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It really is touching. I think it back to my own story of, what orthodontics did for me. So I just really appreciate you sharing that. Let me ask you this. So you mentioned just a moment ago, something I think is really important that I think a lot of people think about. I would even venture to guess that a lot of people have on their to-do list, and they recognize the importance of it, but maybe aren't really good at the execution of it or the doing of it, which is finding out what your team member's why is, what their why statement is, really what motivates them and moves them. What made you kind of think out, and I do believe this, outside the box when it comes to developing your team in that manner?
Well, I guess I felt like too often I was running into people within my own industry, other orthodontists, let alone my staff, who were questioning why they were coming in to work each day. And it always, here's the thing. I started to notice this major conflict in people where it started earlier on. I did this 5 Languages of Love with my wife. Mm-hmm. And that's a really great book. If anybody is never done that, it's a really good thing to know about yourself and your wife so you speak the same language. So then I took that and I wanted to see what it looked like with my staff, because a lot of the discussions with staff is, well, how can I get the raise? What's my next pay opportunity? And I said, well, let's just see what this looks like. So I had them take that, and interestingly enough, along the scale of the 5 love languages, one of them is receiving gifts. So you could easily say that's the money component. That's, things or bling, whatever. And it was like the last thing for every single one of my staff. Every single one of them, the very first was words of affirmation, or service or quality time. Those are like the top 3 for every single one of the staff. And I saw this inconsistency where they're asking for raises, they're asking for, money, because they think that that's going to make them happy. And I'm like, well, you're telling me this is going to make you happy, but let's talk about it. I don't know if you realize what really is going to make you happy. So that was one of the first things that really had me dive into, as you say, out of the box thinking into what brings joy to our team. So then as I was diving into it, we watched, a lot of people have probably seen that short YouTube clip of Simon Sinek where he talks about starting with why and the golden circle.
Golden circle, yeah.
And so nowadays we post that as part of our recruitment effort and say, if you're going to apply here, send us your why statement and watch this short video. And so they send that to us, and we always make sure, does that align with what they're talking about? Does that align with what we represent as a company? And inevitably it does. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to have them on the team. So
I kind of chuckle a little bit under it because I love that you send a possible applicant something to do besides just fill out the application and maybe do an interview, right? And tell them what your expectations are before you come in, and to know that this is a piece of the hiring process. When I sometimes have people who we give ideas like this to, they're like, well, I can't ask them to do something before I hire them. I mean, that's going to be weird. And it's like, well, why not? Like, that's so powerful, because now they're walking into it and everyone knows what's the expectation, at least in this little part here. I think it's really powerful.
Right.
So we've talked a lot when we were together about how, speaking of 5 love languages and that assessment, like, you have done a lot of assessments with your team. And that's one of the kind of themes that I want to really focus on with our time here together, is around the ways that you put together the different assessments and how you find them, and how do you use that information to help you be a better leader and to grow a better team.
So some people may not need it. I can appreciate that, but I need it. I need it because of I know who I am. I'm sort of an analytical guy. And I would venture to say that a lot of us orthodontists are that way, whether or not we like it or not. I think that the educational system has pounded that into us. We look at so many research articles and have taken classes on statistics and analytics, and I think just by nature of how we got to where we are, we already have an analytical mind about things. The staff don't generally think that way, so sometimes they might bemoan the idea of taking all these assessments. They feel like it, so you got to be careful not to make them feel like you're judging them based on numbers. That's probably the first thing. But the value that I see behind it is it gives me a big picture in a very organized, systematic perspective. I can have them take these assessments, and it helps me help them, help me help them, kind of thing. Because I know what they need, so that I can give them the support whereby if I give them a task and I say, hey, I need you to do this, and their support network is not there to do it, then they're going to fail, and I'm going to be upset that they failed. But by taking all these assessments, I try to analyze it and think, what do you need in terms of your personality to accomplish this task, and we make that happen. It works out great.
Well, let's talk about the tangibleness of that, right? Is that a right word? Tangibleness?
Right.
The tangibility of that? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. Because I'm sure there's people listening going, okay, yeah, I've done those tests. Yeah, I've had them take the Colby test, and yeah, the Myers-Briggs test. Yep, done that. But there's been no change. Like, so what? I know that information. You seem to have taken it to another level where you're actually really using that information and trying to develop people through that knowledge and taking on that responsibility for yourself too. So how are you doing? Is there any specific examples that you can give us?
Yeah. So, for example, we do performance reviews on a regular basis, and it's one thing to have everyone take the same performance review in terms of skill levels, and that's great. But we always try to add in some unique, customized questions on there that play towards their strengths and weaknesses, as you find out on these assessments. Let me give you an example. One of the assessments that we've done recently is, how do you approach conflict in another person? It comes from the Crucial Conversations book, and it talks about, are you a avoider, or are you abrasive? You kind of come straight at them, or do you kind of stay away because you don't even want to talk about it?
Right.
So if we look on their assessment and say it determines that, hey, they are actually an avoider, and that's a weakness of theirs that they've self-identified from these assessments, we can say, let's put this on your performance review down here. Let's say, grade yourself on this level, and then we'll grade you, and we'll see where we're at. And then depending on where they fit on that scale, we might be able to find, we don't just brush it under the rug either. We say, you know what, if you have a weakness, we want to make it a strength at some point. And so let's set some goals in terms of making that better. So that's one way we do that.
So when it comes to like best practices on how, say I'm a doc and I'm like, okay, I've never done an assessment before except for myself. I know how great I am. I'm just trying to get other people to catch up to me. What have you found has been the best, I guess, assessment that has given you the most usage for your team?
Probably that love languages that I was telling you
Oh,
about. Yeah.
interesting. Very simple.
It's super simple, and start with the free or simple ones and then go from there. Because obviously if you there's some that are great that I would recommend. One's called the Colby A Index, but that's like $50 a pop. And then if you're trying to run reports between the different participants, that costs money. So don't start big. Start with the simple stuff and get to know
Yeah.
how it works. And so yeah, I'd say probably the love languages. They call it languages of appreciation in the workplace.
That one's very good. Yeah.
Politically correct. Yeah.
Yeah, with Dr. White, Dr. Chapman. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to test you on something though, because you're analytical. You like to kind of really go over the data. When it comes to one of the biggest challenges with the love languages, let's stay with that one, is that I find out that my love language is physical touch. That's my top one. By the way, all the love languages are good. Let's just put that out, get that out of the way. But the top one's the one you really feel the most love with. But yours is gifts. And I don't care about gifts. It's my lowest one, like you said, with your team, right? As a leader, as someone who kind of makes sense out of things, how hard has it been for you, or could you, has it in the past, I guess we'll just leave it there, has been for you to give someone something that you don't quite value in the same way?
Oh, absolutely. That's very difficult. And it requires you to constantly try to think of it. And even when you do, you're still going to miss it or forget it or not give it to the level that they desire it. So here's the thing. When I present these things to the staff, I say, please take these assessments, but don't think that just because you've taken them means that I'm going to master them in a day.
Smart.
So it goes both ways. You've taken the assessment too, and you know now what your language of appreciation is. So I need your help. And I tell this story about my kid. I came home, my little daughter, Kristen, she was 4 years old. And Dad came home. She was so excited to see me, and she ran and she grabbed my knee. And so I picked her up and I was holding her in my arms. But I immediately started to talk to my wife about the day. And I had something that I wanted to talk to her about. And she's like, hey, Dad, hey, Dad, hey, Dad. So Kristen's in my arms trying to get my attention. But here I am, I'm talking to my wife because, I hadn't seen her all day and I wanted to give her my attention. So after like a few seconds of, hey, Dad, she grabbed my cheeks and turned them to her and said, Dad, I need to talk to you. And this is my daughter just grabbing my attention physically. And I used that as a metaphor to my staff. I said, listen, I do have written down on a sheet what your appreciation language is. And I have all these other things on my plate too. I'm going to do my very best to fulfill that for you. But you have to realize that there's a lot of you and there's one of me. And so there may be times when you're like, hey, doctor, hey, doctor, hey, doctor, and you're trying to communicate with me on the language that you desire so much. I said, it's okay if you just say, doctor, I need to turn your head. And I actually have a couple of staff that I've asked them to do that for me. Like I have some wonderful staff who say, hey, doc, I need to turn your head towards somebody. They're needing your attention. So, give it to them. And they need that attention in whatever language they need. So
what a great story and a great point that, sometimes we got to tell people how we need them to treat us or pay attention to us. And we got to also tell people, I love that you set up the expectation of, I'm not going to master this, just, what yours is and know exactly how to do it just because I'm asking you to take the assessment. By the way, lest anybody think that, you have 4 people you're doing this for. What's your team total right now?
We're, hovering around 25 staff right now.
Yeah. So any of you that are out there going like, oh yeah, well, it's good you got 4 people, you can do that. No, you're like, you keep those systems in place so you can grow to a bigger team members and you can have that opportunity there. All right, I'm gonna say this because I thought it was really funny. When it's just an exercise you can do with your team, or anybody listening can do the same thing. So I used to teach this in a marriage course that I did years and years and years ago. And one of the things that we used to do is we used to talk about the love languages, and I have a tiny little different spin on it. I have actually two more different languages or whatever. But at the end of the conversation, I would do an activity and I would say, okay, so guys, as husbands, I want you to write down like 10 things that would make you feel loved based upon your love languages. And, all the guys, if yours is physical touch, it can't be sex, 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 right? You got to like mix it up a little bit.
Right.
And then ladies, I'm going to have you write down what are 10 things that would make you feel really loved. And it has to be true. It has to be something that, man, if my spouse did this for me, if my husband did this for me, it would really make me feel loved. Within those love languages, maybe take 2 or 3 of the different ones. So I'd have them all do this. And I said, okay, now you're going to explain what this means to you. And so you're going to tell the other person doesn't get it, to get to argue back or say, no, I don't agree with that. You just get to tell each other why this would make you feel happy. Oh, going on a walk around the park, holding hands, that would really make me feel loved. Or you just tell me how much you appreciate me, that I feel loved, whatever it is. And at the end of that, I would say, all right, now very carefully, pass your list to each other and exchange your list. Now, when your spouse has any type of complaint or frustration or whatever about, or you don't know how to show your love to them, now you have the list of 10 things you can do. Go put it on your bathroom mirror. Go put it in your closet wall. Go put it on your refrigerator. But now you have the list. And I had one guy come up to me, and that time I think I was charging like $1,500 for a seminar or something. And he came up and he goes, I paid you $1,500 to make a list to know how to tell my wife that I love her and that she could do the same for me. And I went, yep. And he goes, worth every penny.
Yeah, you're like, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Right.
Well, because I think so many people just get in. You said earlier, you shouldn't assume anything. And I think that every single one of us has at some point in our lives assumed that the other person on that end of the conflict should know better. I mean, they should know better. They're smart. They should, but inevitably you sit back and you think, actually, no, they're not mind readers. I mean, I have to communicate what my needs are, and they have to communicate what their needs are. And it goes for couples or staff or patients even,
And their perception is so different. Every day is a new perception, right? Like you never know what's going to change that. I do a game with my teams called the perception game, that at the end, that's the point, is that although they think they work together 8 hours a day, I sometimes divide it by clinic and admin. It doesn't matter. The results are always going to be the same because we have different perceptions, and the perspective of what we're dealing with is our own. Even I say, I've known my wife since I was 5 years old. We've been married 25 years. There's not that much we don't know about each other. But when I get the most trouble in my relationship, it's when I assume stuff. When I just assume that that's how she's going to react. Let me ask you this, because we had this conversation while we were at the meeting, and I had said one of the things that I think is interesting about assessments that not a lot of people think about is most people will take an assessment, and let's just say they take the DISC assessment, and they find out they're a high D, and then they'll tell everybody, well, I'm a high D, and that's their excuse, right? It's like they'll be asked to, well, I'm a high D, instead of realizing that the point of assessments is, one, to find that out if you didn't know that already, which most people already knew that, because most people take these assessments like, yep, that's exactly right? Every once in a while you'll be surprised. But the other side of the assessment taking is all the other things that you are low at or you aren't hitting top marks on. That's what you're supposed to be learning. That's where you become a more well-rounded person, where you look at and go, oh man, maybe I should look at the I or the S. Like that's where I should be looking. So if it's love languages, maybe I don't have to love getting gifts, but I have to build the muscle of giving gifts so that I can become better at it.
Right.
So
we try to emphasize that very aspect, because we always lead with sort of a compliment sandwich. We always lead with, you are amazing in this area. And your assessment tells you that. Like, that's really great. I want you to always know that that's a good strength that you should, continue to use towards your advantage. However, this area could use a lot of work. And so let's work on some goals on how to make that better. And then you sort of end with another compliment like, but I know you can do it. So we try to use that same emphasis that you're describing to say, I don't want to dwell on the thing that you feel like you're bad at, but we need to address it. It's still an elephant in the room.
That's right. And it's going to help strengthen them. It's just another muscle they get to strengthen. So
right.
That's awesome. Well, I believe that every business, I love asking this of professionals who come on the show, because every business, most of the people have on, they're striving, they're doing well, they're working hard, but every business has their challenges, has a challenge in one place or another. Let's talk real quickly about any areas of your business where you feel like it could be something you think is common for a lot of people. Maybe talk to other buddies or other people in the profession with you. It could be something you feel is unique to you. But where's a challenge that we can discuss that's going on in your business at this time?
So this is probably a challenge that a lot of us face, big or small, but that's the art of delegation. I think, when you talk to most entrepreneurs and you ask, why did you want to be an entrepreneur? And a lot of them say, well, freedom of schedule. I can delegate and I'm out of there. And the unique thing about us is that we do not have that freedom. I mean, the mere fact that we have our license tied to the product, if we, first off, the dental boards will prevent you from leaving and delegating 100%.
Yeah.
And secondly, that is your product every day. So you can't really have that freedom like a traditional entrepreneur.
Sure.
So then becomes the conflict. I still want to delegate, but I need to do it within the confines of my license and in terms of how well they can take this on themselves. So delegation is probably our biggest thing at the moment. Everybody has their, the idea is if you find a problem, then find a solution, and we're working towards that solution now. But I think our biggest thing right now is delegation, and it comes from both ends. It's me being able to be clear, like, here's the expectation, here's the timeline, here's a true clear vision on what I would like that to look like at the end. So that becomes my onus to get that across, and then on their end they have to receive it. It's like a baton through a relay. You got to be like, I'm giving this to you with clear expectations, and you're grabbing it and you're running with it.
Now run.
Yeah.
I was just on an interview earlier today, and we were talking about this topic about, kind of almost a rule if you could, where it's like, if I have something that comes to my desk or it comes to my awareness and I think, okay, when am I going to fit that in? That shouldn't be the first question.
Right.
It should be like, who else can do this for me? Like I mentioned this at my event, which is called the who, not how, right? Not how do I do this? How do I fit this in? How do I schedule this? Who can do this? Because majority of stuff, I would even say that the high majority of stuff can be delegated out. As a matter of fact, it's going to make you better at doing those things that can't be delegated out. Like you said, they can't walk away. You have to be there for that. But there's so much stuff that you can pass on. And if we really do look at our team members as leaders in embryo, it's like, okay, knowing who can do what or what their capacity is at this moment to say, all right, not only do I want you to do this, you report back to me. You tell me when you're going to report back. You tell me what the benchmarks are going to be so that I know. And I'm going to measure you on your next. And I love that you guys do so many employee evaluations. But on the next employee evaluation, that's going to be a part of it. And on the flip side of that, I love telling team members, and it's always a big shock in their face when I say, hey, look, you want to know how to get a raise without ever, being rejected? go to them with the stuff you've done. Go to them with things like this. Like, remember that time you asked me to do this? Well, I created a whole thing like this and I did that. And make the presentation. Don't just say, hey, we were breathing the same air this last 12 months, so I deserve a raise, right?
I deserve it.
So, yeah. So delegation is one thing that I hear from so many people. I think everybody listening to this podcast can totally understand and relate. And it's that another one of those courses that they didn't teach you in school.
Right.
It's like, where was Delegation 101 that we could have just learned this?
I mean, life doesn't even teach that to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard, even as a parent, to delegate in an efficient manner. You're like, go do that. And then when they fail, you're like, I'll just do it, you know? And so we run into the same thing. Your church does the same thing. Your school does the same thing. It's a constant bane on society, and it comes up in different forms. They say delegation. I think it boils down to a lot of different things. Or they say, accountability is a big word. But I don't know, just the art of delegation is something that we need to work on right now. So.
Awesome. That's good. Are there any specifics that you're trying to put into place that anybody listening could try in their office too?
Yeah. I mean, I've been reading a number of articles lately, and one is to make sure it's like it's smart in that it's got a time commitment to it. Like, I'd like to have it done by this time. That's been a really important thing, because you might say, I want that done. And in your head, you're thinking 1 week, and in their head, they're thinking 1 month. So,
or a year,
right? It's very quick. So there's a lot of doctors lately have been using programs like Asana and other to-do project lists.
Yep.
The nice thing about those is it forces you to clarify a number of things. Who's in charge? Just like you said, you have to actually assign it to a person. You can have followers. You can have people that are involved in the discussion, but there's always only one person involved as the person accountable. It usually has a due date, and it usually has a description, or your vision, if you will. And then throughout, you can add to the channel in terms of how it's going. But that tool has been really helpful for us and others. We still run into the issue of, I don't even have enough time to put it on the Asana chart. So it's like you're creating a task to create a task.
Yeah.
That's the hurdle that we're running into right now. I'm not sure I have a good solution to that, but the tool and the process is
it's there.
It's there. Yeah.
I say it half-heartedly joking, but also serious about it, because I've seen it done, and I think it's very cool. I even talk about, in my book, I talk about the Rockstar Effect, right? Of getting that, literally that personal assistant, like a rock star does, or like an actor does, that they don't have time to put it on their schedule either, but just have something like that and go, okay, Joan, put that make sure something, like you're telling somebody as to do it for you, so you're not in the middle of having to do it. And I know I've had a lot of doctors like, what, you mean somebody just following me around and doing that? And I'm like, yeah, somebody coming in and doing that. Like, what would be so crazy about that?
Right.
And so
that's something I've actually been thinking about that a lot, actually, lately.
Oh, good. Yeah. I think it's a great idea to just have somebody else not to worry about it. I get caught up in that in my business, where it's like, I have this stuff and I think, I'll remember that. And then I'll get to that day and be like, what was that thing I was supposed to be doing? I can't remember it.
Well, and what's worse is, time is a valuable commodity, but so is energy. And when you have to think of the exact same task, just to think of it twice, 3 times, you're expending both time and energy. If you could just think of it once and delegate it right away and move on, you're going to be way more efficient.
So it makes me chuckle, because I've been thinking about this lately, and I'm never going to do this, but you look at the Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, even Bill Gates does this to a point where they wear the same clothes all the time,
right?
Because they don't want to have to think about it. And
it expends valuable neurons. Yeah.
It sounds crazy, but it also, that's one less thing I have to think about on a daily basis.
Hey, I've got an easy one for you. Do you know, just shave your head like this?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, then you don't even have to comb your hair, and it's like
I have totally sat in jealousy sometimes like, all right, should I just shave it all? It's going already. You could tell. So I might as well.
Oh yeah,
So,
it's a liberator. You're gonna wake up so refreshed. It'll be great.
one less thing I have to do. Well, Aaron, you're awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. At the end of all of our shows, I like to ask 6 kind of rapid fire questions, just let people get to know a little bit more about you. Are you willing to play?
Sure.
All right. First question is, what's the one thing that you wish that they would have taught you in school?
It's not necessarily a skill per se. It's just that the reality that you're probably not going to make everyone happy. And I desire that. My personality is such that it hurts me when I feel like I failed at that. But just that reality check, like, you know what? You're probably not going to be a match for every single person, be it staff or patient or whomever. Just realize that do your best and you'll be fine.
What's the one thing that you think most doctors are missing out inside of their practice?
What do I think most doctors are missing?
Yeah, what they're missing, practice owners, what are they missing that's costing them money in their practice?
So that could be a double-edged sword, obviously. If I were to piggyback off my last response, I think that some doctors are so intent on pleasing everyone that they please no one. Because they're just so, but the pendulum swings both ways, right? So there are doctors who just don't give a care, and so I would say, I mean, certainly could be finessed a lot more, but I think that the thing that most of us lack is the ability to find that middle area where we're really truly caring about what people want and need, but then still finding enough personal comfort in, that didn't work out, we're going to move on to the next one, kind of thing.
I agree. I think it's really important. I think it's deep down, it's part of the integrity process, right?
Right.
Just being real with that. All right. What's a book that you feel like every practice owner should read?
I'd probably say I'm going to say start with why, because I already mentioned that earlier. I think everybody should read that.
Yeah.
Some that have been more influential for me were Delivering Happiness. Here's something. I have a really good library that I enjoy, and something that actually your partner Amy was mentioning to me the other day was that when you're considering books to read, think as well into what the audience is. Here's an example. My wife, she loves the Jane Austen books,
right?
Like Sense and Sensibility and all that stuff.
My wife too. Yep.
Right. And I was, for years I've been like, no, thank you. I'll fall asleep if that's the case. But she thinks it's crazy that I read all these books about business. And so I'd say, while I do have a recommendation in terms of Start With Why and all these business books of what I would love, I would say also try to find a book that you don't think you'll enjoy, but your audience might. And so Amy
get to know them a little more.
Yeah, Amy was talking about how, listen, I have a lot of staff and I love them. Most of them are women, and so just to be careful not to push topics or books on them that they just don't relate to. So right now, she, at her recommendation, I've been listening to this book by Rachel Hollis, and typically her audience is not analytical men, and I just thought I've been getting a lot from it because it's been helping me to perceive it from a different angle. The same content, the same motivation, the same inspiration, if you will, but in a different way. So I would just say, encourage you to not only eat the spend your time on the books that you enjoy, but a little bit of time on the ones that your audience would enjoy.
It's a great advice and great example. Girl Wash Your Face, obviously Rachel Hollis, and you're just going to have a different perspective, and that perspective is going to help you communicate a little bit better. I love it. So I guess you're going to have to start reading some Jane Austen stuff too. So
actually, I did in a way.
Good.
I read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so that was my intention to try to learn about it, but then there's zombies in the background and there's all these fights.
I even got Shannon to watch the movie with me because
no way, hey, that's pretty good.
And she was like, and like literally the 10 minutes in, she's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, but
no, my wife listened to parts of the Audible version with me, and she was just cracking up. She was awesome. Appreciative that I made the effort in the first place, but
that's right.
So I did. Awesome. I have, in a way, I have.
Is there a way if people listening wanted to reach out to you, ask you questions? Is there the best way that they can do that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. They're welcome to email me at drw@shareyoursmile.com, and we can start a conversation for sure.
Nice, love it. Okay, what's the best advice you've ever received in life or business?
Best advice in life or business. So I think it wasn't necessarily advice. I'll probably spin it. I was talking to you about this earlier, and that is just sort of an epiphany or a realization. When I was younger, I always looked up to my dad as the know-all, be-all. He had an answer for everything, and there was no problem that he couldn't solve. And I would always get frustrated at myself because I'm like, how come I didn't see that answer? How come I didn't know that? And it dawned on me, in my mid-20s, as I was going through a lot of life issues, if you will, that actually when my dad was this age, he didn't have all the answers either. And he still doesn't even have all the answers. He just has so many more years ahead of me. So not necessarily advice, but maybe just a realization that I would probably share with anybody, which is, you are where you are, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. It's good to always look forward and say, how can I be better? And look up to people like my dad or mentors that seem to have all the answers. But just realize you're in the right spot because you've worked to get there, and you still have years to go of experience. So just be the advice that don't get frustrated. Just realize that it's a journey, and you're at this part of the journey, and just keep going.
Love it. I think it's so important. It is true. It's like you are where you are. Don't envy. Don't worry about it. It'll come. And it's hard to be patient sometimes. It's hard to be in that place. But man, I appreciate that so much. Aaron, this has been great information. Thank you so much for being a part of the show and for sharing what you have with people, from your touching story of when you were a teenager all the way up to just that advice right there. I really appreciate it. I know that our listeners will appreciate it too.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dino.
Absolutely. It's been a joy. And thank you, everybody, for listening in on the show and for all your efforts. Thank you for making the show what it is, and for subscribing and for sharing it with those that are around you. If you have a friend or a colleague that you think should be hearing not just the message from Dr. Williams, but from everybody else as well, I think it's so important. So please make sure that you subscribe and share it with those people around you. And thank you again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast, where that our goal is to help you be more proactive, productive, and profitable in all areas of your life and business. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest, or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.